Okie dokie. So, I apologise for this, people. Obviously, I was ready to come into work today, and things have somewhat worked against me. I was going to do a Hamlet bit with Coleridge, but the way I wanted to do the Hamlet bits isn't really going to work without some kind of human interaction. So I'm just going to do the Coleridge bits. A lot of you wanted Christabel going over. So what I'm going to do, I will go over Christabel in a very kind of overall way, just kind of summarising it. I will keep stopping off at various points and just drawing out some kind of comparative angles. I would suggest, again, I'm sure some of you won't do this, but probably the best way to do it is to kind of pause it at various points and have a think about it yourself, rather than just kind of wait to give you the answers. You're probably going to kind of find that you actually get more from it if you do that when it comes to those kind of comparative points, and then you can kind of check against it when you get answers. This is my first time doing it on iPhone or iPad even, so the only way to do it with a video cast alongside is to have it kind of open with a kind of webcam test there. I've also got to do it as one big long recording. I can't actually pause the recording unless I'm kind of going mad within it. So you will probably find that this is not also my most coherent recording. So apologies for that as well. So if you want to get Christabel out in front of you, I'm not going to do anything that's kind of, massively different from where we went through it in class. I'm not going to draw out anything entirely different. It's more to do with kind of recalling over it, linking it to A Doll's House as your kind of comparative text. Okay, so if you want to pause me and go and get to your poem now, that would probably be sensible. If not, here we go, people. So, in the earliest section of the poem, there's not a lot that I would kind of draw out from it. These early kind of stanzas are just about kind of setting the scene. It's dark, it's the night time. Everything is kind of a bit kind of ethereal as it goes with it. Again, there are bits that you might choose to kind of draw out from it, but I don't think there's anything super useful in terms of comparison stuff. The bit that I might draw out is the bit that I've got kind of highlighted here. So Sir Leoline the Baron Rich hath toothless mastiff bitch. It's this recurring motif that keeps coming back into the poem again and again. And basically it kind of draws out kind of the disempowered female figure, but you've also got the kind of the wealthy, the empowered male figure. So you could start drawing that out in terms of comparison to Torvald. Torvald is analogous to Sir Leoline. He's got the kind of the wealth, the prestige. You've got Nora, who's the kind of toothless female figure, this kind of just general disempowering of the female figure. You want to remember the context here. The mastiff bitch is also kind of a guard animal. So it signifies the kind of failure of protection kind of in various different ways as we kind of go through the poem. As we move into the next bit, it becomes slightly more useful in terms of drawing out comparison to A Doll's House. So we get the introduction of Christabel, a kind of a possession of her father, essentially, or her father loves her well. You could maybe link that to Nora's father, to the way that kind of comes in there. But the bit that I'm kind of interested in is this bit here for the moment. So what makes her in the wood so late, a furlong from the castle gate? She had dreams all yesternight of her own betrothed knight, where the figure of Christabel has symbolically left the place of protection. So castle represents this kind of place of protection. She's left it, she's in the woods, she's in the wilds, and she's been drawn out by kind of a temptation, essentially. In this case, we assume it's kind of romantic, kind of sexual temptation. It's her betrothed night. But this is the bit that I will kind of link to A Doll's House in a minute. So she's kind of left this place of safety and symbolically moved into the kind of wider world. You obviously won't need to do this in the exam. It's your second paper that this is relevant to. Having said that, Christabel is a Gothic poem, so you might choose to make the link there. You could make a legitimate link out of it. Think about The Company of Wolves or The Werewolf, where you've got the female figure who must walk down the path, who must not stray off the path, otherwise they kind of face a potential threat. And the same is kind of true for Nora here, essentially, and for Christabel within the context of the poem. You've also got the kind of seeking out of that kind of place of protection, that place of kind of guidance. So remember in Coleridge, you've got the image of the oak tree even, that Ted Hughes talks about. Coleridge always seeking the oak. It's sort of symbolic of the protection he kind of seeks after. Here within the poem, you get this kind of idea. She kneels beneath the huge oak tree and in silence prayeth she. So she is going to this place, seeking kind of guidance, seeking protection, seeking strength. And then at this point, we get the kind of introduction of Geraldine. So in seeking this place of strength, she actually finds weakness. Okay? So, again, you can pause it here if you want to and have a quick think about it yourself. Find both bits. The version of A Doll's House that I'm kind of drawing from is one of the online versions, because I didn't have the book with me, but the actual translation will be fairly similar. You should be able to find it in your own books or just through the analogous section. So I would take this first bit here, and I think you can make various different comparisons to this end bit in A Doll's House. So listen, Torvald, I have heard that when a wife deserts her husband's house, as I am doing now, he is legally freed from all obligations towards her. In any case, I set you free from all your obligations. You are not to feel yourself bound in the slightest way any more than I shall. There must be perfect freedom on both sides. See, here is your ring back. Give me mine. So remember, it's similarity and difference. So have a think about it. You can probably come up with kind of multiple points, similarity and difference, if you think carefully about it. So now would be a good point to pause, or you can just kind of listen to me go through it as well in a second. But have a pause if you want to. Right, okay, so basically both of them are leaving a place of protection. So this is at the end of A Doll's House and it's at the start of Christabel, but it's an analogous place. So Nora is leaving the protection of her husband's house. She's leaving the protections that he offers to her. It's leaving them in a far more kind of conscious way though, and the reasons for leaving are entirely different. So your parallel here is kind of leaving a place of protection. The husband's house becomes analogous to the kind of castle. Nora is kind of consciously casting off, sort of as I am doing now. I set you free of all of your obligations, whereas, Christabel clings on to them. And essentially what Christabel's doing is seeking a new place of protection. She's dreaming of her betrothed knight. This isn't a kind of an empowering female image. She's still kind of in this suppressed place of protection. Whereas Nora kind of is casting off all these kind of older bonds, these kind of symbolic bits. So the giving back of the rings is a kind of subversion. It's a defiance of kind of the marriage system, a kind of casting off of this. So both of them are leaving this place of protection. The motivations are different, and that's something you could explore in an essay question. You could have a question on protection. You could link this into kind of, again, questions on desire, and what kind of leads people to these different decisions. There's various different ways that this kind of idea could manifest in the exam, and you use it in kind of different ways. I mean, you could also deal with it. They ask questions about kind of foolish acts and things like that. Both of them are running risks here. Whilst Nora's is kind of on one level empowering, we like to see her as a modern audience kind of challenging the systems of power. It's not necessarily going to be a happy future for her. As a woman who's kind of left her husband, she's going to be judged. She's going to be attacked, essentially, on all sides. Society will judge her, and she will have to kind of work within those bounds. Right, if we go through the poem a bit further, it's the initial introduction of kind of Geraldine, who she kind of finds behind the oak, and you get the sense of kind of fear and anxiety. This is an unknown figure that she finds behind the oak tree. And the narrative voice itself is what we would describe as being quite subjective. They've got a clear perspective and opinion. They side with Christabel. So you've got the kind of appeal here. This is the narrative voice appealing for protection for Christabel. Jesus, Maria, shield her well. This is kind of Jesus protect her, Virgin Mary protect her, and that desire for kind of protection coming in. You then get the direct introduction of Geraldine as a figure. And Geraldine initially is a kind of damsel white, dressed in a silken robe of white. So she is a figure of beauty. There's something kind of sensuous about her, but she's associated with the image of white purity. It's, again, you think about the physicality to this, the fact that there is a more sensual depiction with Geraldine. The neck that made the white robe one, it basically means her neck is even whiter than the robe, but it's drawing attention to her in a more physical sense, away from the kind of symbolic clothing. It's kind of body focus for Geraldine. So there's something kind of different here in terms of the characterisation of Christabel, who we know is kind of the lovely lady, but we don't get this kind of physical characterisation in the same way. It kind of goes on and progresses it, and essentially what's happening in the poem is Christabel is going, what on earth are you doing here? Why have I just found you behind a tree? And Geraldine tells this kind of anecdotal story that explains why she's been kind of found there. And she says, well, basically, like Christabel, so she's a kind of foil character in some ways. She aligns with Christabel's. Christabel's father is Sir Leoline. Geraldine says, my sire is of a noble line and my name is Geraldine, so my father is also noble. And she tells this story of essentially being abducted by a group of warriors. And it could be taken very, very literally. She has been kidnapped, maybe with the idea of being held for ransom, and they've kind of taken her away from her father's protection. You also read this in a more allegorical way, whereby there's this kind of violent brutality that's associated with these men, and also certain language that maybe suggests something kind of sexually euphemistic. So they choked my cries with force and fright and tied me on a palfrey white. And they kind of, this sort of horse ride becomes analogous to something sexual. and she's then kind of discarded. He placed me underneath this oak. He swore he would return with haste, and then they just leave her. And if you think about this as kind of as if it was a genuine kind of kidnapping and ransom, this doesn't really make sense, like plot wise, to just leave your figure that you're going to ransom behind an oak tree and be like, I'll be back later. The reading of this is more like a reading of Ophelia, potentially in Hamlet, and some of the bawdy songs she sings later on, where it's kind of, there's a promise, if you wed me, then, you know, start again. There's a sort of promise, if they have sex, then she'll be wed. But when she gives in to that and allows her desire to come through, then she doesn't wed. If you read through the songs that she sings in Act 4, Scene 5, there's that kind of implication within those, which, again, the argument runs, you can link back to kind of Hamlet and potentially what's happened there. There are various critics who say they're just bawdy songs. They've got nothing to do with Hamlet, but it's one of those kind of debatable points. The idea that Geraldine, potentially within this analogy, has given up her virtue, but then because she's given up her virtue, she's lost any sense of value and has simply been discarded. And she's then kind of essentially passing that on to Christabel. And then we get the kind of offering. Christabel is clearly moved by this plight, and the implication is that she's going to offer protection, both herself and through her father, Sir Leoline. So, a couple of different compare ones this time. Just from Christabel, it's the description of Geraldine. There she sees a damsel bright, dressed in a silken robe of white. You can, again, these aren't the only place you can compare it to, but I would say, if I was doing it, something like this, where Torvald and Nora are returning from the party, they're talking to Mrs. Lind, and you then get this bit. So the chief thing is, she had made a success. She'd made a tremendous success. Do you think I was going to let her remain there after that and spoil the effect? No, indeed. I took my charming little Capri maiden, my capricious little Capri maiden, I should say, on my arm, took one quick turn around the room, a curtsy on either side, and as they say in novels, the beautiful apparition disappeared. So have a quick think about it. There's a couple of similarities and differences you could draw out of it. I'll give you a moment to kind of pause, and then I'll kind of go through it. Right, okay, so it's just the beauty here. It's an image of beauty, it's kind of feminine beauty. You get the kind of the image of the damsel bright. Nora has created a kind of a great success with her kind of her beauty, her dance. It's been kind of very effective. There's something of the kind of show around it. It's kind of theatrical, a curtsy on either side. There's this kind of clear sense that Torvald is essentially aroused by the performance, whether that's through Nora herself or the social image she's created. It doesn't really matter. There's an attraction to it, and again, Geraldine's figure of attraction, and the kind of beauty that goes with it. You've got this idea of the theatre, though, and dressing up of kind of false images. Nora isn't a kind of Capri maiden, a capricious little Capri maiden. Neither is Geraldine a kind of pure, innocent figure of whiteness. So you've got the kind of false images that go into it. As it progresses through as well, in a far more direct way in Christabel, Geraldine becomes a more kind of supernatural figure. Nora is described in supernatural terms, the beautiful apparition disappeared, but in a very kind of consciously literary way, as they say in the novels, and he's sort of imitating this, whereas it's far more literal with Christabel. The other one I would kind of pick out here is the depiction of the kind of male figures who've supposedly kidnapped Geraldine, and drawing out something in and around that. And I would have it against kind of Torvald on the other side. So, no tragic airs, please. Locks the hall door. Here, you shall stay and give me an explanation. Do you understand what you've done? Answer me. Do you understand what you've done? So again, just think what you can kind of draw out here in terms of kind of comparison, okay? Right. So I'm assuming you've paused and thought about it deeply and found both bits in your text. You've just got the violence and the kind of brutality that goes with these figures. So this kind of idea they choked, the force, and you've got a kind of violent kind of control here with Torvald. It never reaches a kind of a physical element in quite the same way, but you get the stage direction. He locks the hall door. He entraps her, and her language is brutal here. This is the bit following on from where he's kind of read the letter, where he believes the letter has kind of essentially ruined him, and he's furious with her. So you get this kind of, direct attack on her. It's not a physical attack, but it's that kind of brutal breakdown of the sanctity of their marriage, essentially. So he's very kind of harsh with her. And it's the same as kind of on here, where it's that same kind of violent kind of control that's being depicted across both of them for different reasons, different kind of motivations. This one, again, it depends how you choose to use it in terms of why they're doing this to her, what the kind of symbolism and imagery is. And then in the other one, it's far more kind of direct. We know it's based on the kind of threat to his social reputation that kind of drives this brutality. I think what I'm going to do, I'll probably split this into two videos just so it's slightly easier to upload. So I'm going to stop this one now and I'll split it into the other one.